Now let us take a look at how to build multiple containers from the image we just built. Step 4 of this exercise is to run a container from the image. As you can see, I provided the syntax for running the container from an image. It uses the docker run command, and then these are some parameters which have been explained below. -name is the name of the container. -p is the port which the host maps to the container. And then you provide an image name with a tag, or you could provide an image ID. So -d here represents the detached mode. As you can see, I will go over one of the examples as to run a container with a detached mode. -p, as you can see here, represents the host port to port mapping. If you give a capital P, it will automatically assign a port. So we will go over that example as well. So let's get started with the example. I basically navigated to the PowerShell to the current working directory. In case you're starting this lecture fresh, please make sure that you're in the current working directory. It really doesn't matter, but it's better to do that so that we are all consistent. So I'm just going to copy this, paste this. I provided a name for the container called my HTTP container. As you can see, when I click enter, it basically generates a random number, which is basically the SHA, which is a unique ID to the container. Let me paste the other one as well. So I'm running 2 containers here. The next thing we are going to do is to list all the containers. The next step is to look at step 5. I'm just going to jump a little bit and then come back to step 4 again. So we're going to show all containers which are running. So let's take a look at this. So I'm just going to copy this command and then paste it here. As you can see, there are 2 containers which are running. So let's take a look at how these containers are running. The first attribute which you see here is called the container ID. As you can see, this is the longer version of the container ID, and this is the shorter version. The docker ps command gives you only the running containers, and we will talk about the stopped containers later. It provides the image from which it was built. It gives you the command which is running as default inside the container. It says it was created 2 minutes ago and status is up 2 minutes ago. And then it also provides you the ports as to when or what port in the host machine is mapped to what port inside the container. And the same goes with container number 2. So they're pretty identical. So let's take a look at how these containers function. So our goal, as you're aware, is to launch our own customized version of the container, of the HTTPD image, and to host a website with it. So let's see 5556. So if I look at this, as you can see, this is running within the container. So if I go into 5555, that's also running a server. Now, the thing here is that we ran these containers in a detached mode. That's the -d version. Now let's take a running the container without the detached version. So let's go back here, and I want to run this 4th command, which basically says I want to run this container with in the non-detached mode. I'm just going to name it not detached, and then I'm going to run this here. So as you can see, if it's not running in the detached mode, it's going to start up the container with the process ID of 1, which is the first command which gets run inside the container. Now what we've done is we started it at 5557. So the disadvantage of doing that is, and I can show you 5557 first. The disadvantage of doing this is the moment I do Control-C and get out of the shell, I cannot access the page again. So it's always good to run the container in detached mode. The last thing I wanted to show you is to be able to assign a random port. So let's say for a given use case, I don't want to specify a port like 5556. So what I could do is basically I could just skip the port, and then if you see docker ps, it's going to specify all the ports which are running. But if you see here 32768, that's mapped to port 80, which Nginx is running on. So if I go to localhost 32768, it's going to bring up the web page. So this is one way to basically run on a random port. As I said, --name is completely optional. If you don't specify it, it's going to assign a random name. All right. So let's take a look at one more command, which is docker ps-a. This will enlist all the stopped and started containers. So when we get to that point, I will actually reiterate this, but just be aware that this is going to show up all the started and stopped containers. So as far as this lecture, you have learned how to run multiple containers from an image, how to list containers, and you've also tried to experiment by going and hitting the container on the browser, just like this. So a lot of exciting stuff your way. So let's check it out. Now we're going to take a look at how to inspect a container. The next thing we're going to do is to inspect the container, just like we inspected the image. So I'm just going to do docker ps-a, and then I'm going to say docker inspect, for example. As you can see, this provides all the metadata information of the container. So let's take a look at what metadata information. As you can see, this provides the long form of the unique ID. This is the shortened version. And then it talks about when this was created, when this was paused, when it was finished, started. It also provides the SHA, the image ID from which this was created. It provides the path to the logs in the container, the host name. So this information may be very helpful in resolving any errors or debugging or troubleshooting aspects as far as the use case is concerned. It has a local gateway, it has a local IP address where it is mapped to, it has the MAC address. So typically you're running, as I said, a computer within a computer. So it provides a lot of useful information. Just know that this is a starting point to debug or troubleshoot. Now let's take a look at how we can view the container logs. Once the container starts up, it is possible to view the logs as well. Let's take a look at the command. We are in step 7. So in order to view the logs of the container, I'm just going to go back to the PowerShell. I'm going to do docker ps-a, get all the latest and greatest containers which are running, and then I'm going to do docker logs container ID. So you can just specify the container ID, and then it'll show you all the logs. Now let's say you want to do rolling logging, which means you want to tail the logs when the container gets started up. This is a very important command for troubleshooting and debugging. So all you will need to do this is to add -ft to it. So I'm just going to add docker logs -ft, and as and when the requests come in, it is going to basically poll. So since we started with 5556, I would assume, or maybe it was a different, this is 32768. So I'm just going to go 32768 and click on refresh a few times, and as you can see, the logs start to roll. So you can see the logs is coming up. So you can always do Control-C and eject out of it. So this is about logging the container logs. Now coming to the last part of a lecture, which is to be able to start and stop containers. Now let's take a look at that. Now what I've done is I've listed all the containers which are running. As you can see, one of the containers has exited, which was one of the detached containers. So you can actually do docker ps and then just look at the containers which are running. I like to do docker ps-a if I'm looking at containers which are started and stopped. This is something which you have to note. The second thing we're going to do right now is we're going to stop a container. So the command for that is very simple. You're just going to go ahead and click docker stop container ID. So you can just type it docker stop, and then you can specify this container ID, and it's just going to stop. You can just do docker ps-a and it says that it's exited. So if you go back to the web page, it is no longer going to be accessible. It just keeps rolling. And then if you want to start it again, you just do docker start container ID, and then it's going to start it up. And then you can go back, and then you can just click on this, and it should bring you back the web page. Still starting. So it's possible that it assigned a new ID. That's the reason it's not starting. So let's go take a, oh, you can see this. This is a new port which is assigned. So 32769. So as you can see, it started with a new port because this was one of the detached, or it was one of the instances which we started with a random port. Now let's try the Docker stop with one of those which we actually know the port for. Once I stop it, I go back 5556 is no longer accessible, and then I basically start. So as you can see, it's come back again. So that's about starting and stopping containers. And as I said, you can just do Docker PS to look at all the started running containers, and Docker PS-A to look at all the stopped and started containers. As you can see, one of them is stopped right here. Just something for you to remember. So that's for this lecture. Let's quickly summarize. Now let's quickly summarize what we learned as a part of the lecture. We learned how to run multiple containers from an image in detached mode, in non-detached mode, and also with a random port. We also saw how to list all containers running and stopped, inspect those containers, get some metadata information from them for troubleshooting and debugging. We saw how to view the container logs and also how to stop and start containers. So thank you for watching this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.